Next Generation Wrestling brings some of the most talked about and star-studded professional wrestlers from around the world. Based out of East Tennessee, NGW is becoming one of the most sought-after independent wrestling promotions in the past 4 years. Witness NGW Live or on demand on the High Spots Wrestling Network streaming app. Follow us on social media platforms at NextGenTN.
What is going on, everybody? I, of course, am Eddy Shepard, along with...
Hey, you already know. It's Cody Ford.
Hey! And today, guys, we are finally getting to have the podcast we have tried. It feels like weeks to get done. Luckily, we all had the same day off and worked out perfectly. But we're going to have Tommy Phillips, a.k.a. Shawn Shultz, on the show. Cody, Shawn Shultz, amazing entrance theme.
Oh, man, you got to cue it right now.
It's going to be cued right now. That is by far the best wrestling theme locally I've ever heard.
Yeah, we listened to it earlier, and I was just like, literally for 10 minutes, I was just like singing it after we listened.
Schultz is it's fucking hilarious.
It's catchy, man.
we
It's catchy.
I'm literally like getting everything set up for this podcast, guys, and Cody's whistling the theme song.
Dude, I'm glad that we were able to have him on, but sadly, I kind of miss seeing old Schultz in the ring.
I do. It kind of you'll get to hear it here in a second, guys. But it was nice getting really cool perspective from him, and like you said, like just hearing some of his stories and how much passion he has for wrestling. It kind of sucks that he doesn't perform anymore.
Yeah, it's contagious though, man. And honestly, I'm just glad to have him on board with us. Like I said, he's a great guy, and I think he when you talk about Southern wrestling. Like,
Shawn Shultz is there.
Yeah, you got to mention him. So he's one of the best around here. That, in my opinion.
I agree. But we're not going to talk too much here, guys. This is just a little intro for you guys to get ready for this fun interview we just did with Shawn Shultz. However, we do want to give a shout out to our buddies over at the Rants from the Black Lodge podcast and Brandon Lane, and definitely check them out, guys, at Rants from Black Lodge on their Twitter, Facebook, and all their podcasts. It's pretty good. Here's a little promo for them.
Recording live from the Black Lodge, it's me, the free-will burning, head-turning, ass-kicking, machismo dripping, master podcast and mouthpiece of the Southeast, Brandon A. Lane, host of the Rants from the Black Lodge podcast, inviting all you out there in NGW Wrestling Land to take a walk on the wild side and check out our Golden Pumpkin nominated and 5-star rated film commentary podcast. Each month, we dissect the greatest and sometimes worst films of that particular horror genre, and we interact with the stars and crew of those films. You can find Rants from the Black Lodge podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music, Spotify, Podbean, and our homepage at juicykruger.com. Oh yeah, and don't be a jabroni. Support our good friends at NGW Wrestling by subscribing to NextGenTN podcast now.
Anyways, guys, be sure to check out this podcast with Tommy Phillips. We'll see you guys next week right after this episode. We're going to have a little birthday edition of Mr. Cody Ford, and we may have a cool little special guest lined up for that.
Maybe, if we're all sober enough.
That's true. Like I said, guys, check this podcast out. It's going to be a good one, and we will see you guys next week. What's going on, Shawn?
Hanging out. If you guys hear any background noise, we have 4 of the 5 kids with us here today. So if you hear any playing or anything in the background, just know that it's the kids having a good time.
That's funny, man. I just kind of start from the beginning, man. How you kind of got into wrestling and how long you've been in the business, and just kind of go from there, man.
All right. So pretty much all I wanted to do my whole life was be in professional wrestling. I actually remember the first match I ever saw. I can't remember the exact age, but it was Hulk Hogan versus Earthquake. And my dad actually was like, sit down and watch this with me, boy. And I was like, I don't know. I've heard it's not good. So I sat down and watched it, and I immediately fell in love. And from that point on, that's all I ever said I wanted to do was become a professional wrestler. So actually, got my first job at Burger King at 16 years old and started saving up money. And I was going to go to Mr. Fuji School because everybody knew Mr. Fuji School was in Knoxville. And I met a guy named Jason Benjamin who had done a little bit with K-Town SmackDown at the time with Robert Fuller, and met him. And he actually suggested me going to a local guy named Scott Bishop because Fuji's school apparently wasn't being very consistent, and he had heard rumors that it possibly would be shutting down. About 2 weeks after I started training, Fuji school shut down. So it was a good decision. I went to Scott Bishop and learned the basics, and Scott pretty much that's what he showed me. It took 8 weeks, showed me the basics of everything, told me if I wanted to learn more, that it would kind of be on me to learn it. So he showed me the basics, got me my first match in Maynardville, Tennessee, and met a few guys and did some other local shows, and very early in met Tracy Smothers and started traveling. That's where I really learned how to, I guess, to be a worker and not just a wrestler, I guess.
What year was that when you first really got into it?
I started in 2000, met Smothers in 2001. So it was at the very end of 2000 when I started.
I think the first time I ever saw you was at a KFW show, which would have been probably about 2007.
Probably somewhere around there, yeah. Between 7 and 9, I'm guessing.
Yeah, because I mean, when I first moved here, I moved here from Florida. The whole aspect of indie wrestling really wasn't anything, I wouldn't see it everywhere. Here, even more so now, you feel like you have an independent show every, 20 miles. When I lived in Florida, there was nothing around.
And when I wasn't even aware of indie wrestling, really. Like, I think I'd seen 1 or 2 flyers just out and about in towns that my family would go to churches to. But I didn't really know it existed, really. Like I tried to read the dirt sheets and I tried to do tape trading, but still, it was very infant stages of the internet. So, didn't have a whole lot of access to that kind of stuff.
Do you, man, how much do you think the landscape has changed since then, man? I mean, like I said, you started in like 2000, 2001. I mean, it's 2019 now. I mean, how different is the landscape in East Tennessee now?
And East Tennessee is completely different. I think it's just different, the entire business, really. Because, I mean, when I first started traveling, a lot was probably 01, 02. And it's kind of like it is now, where now you have, you got your Joey Ryans, you got, your Matt Crosses, your Eddie Kingstons, Joey Janela's, you see all the same guys kind of on all the bigger shows. And it's kind of like that back then too, because when I would first start traveling and doing some of the larger shows, I'd go up to Illinois and Chicago area, and you'd run into, back then, you had Matt Stryker, and not the one that was with WWE, but the one that was with Heartland, and Chris Hero, and Punk was already kind of like, he was already just pretty much just Ring of Honor and that kind of stuff. But you see Hero and you see Matt Stryker and you see Chad Collier and you see all these, like, it'd be the same crew pretty much at all the bigger shows. And I think it's very similar now too, because like I said, Kingston's and Matt Cross and Janela and all those guys, they're, Joey Ryan, they're all hitting, Shane Strickland. If you're going to see a show that's going to definitely have a draw, those guys are more than likely going to be on it. And that was kind of the same thing back then, but I think the difference now, the main difference now than then, is everybody's kind of aware of all those guys that I mentioned. And back when I first started traveling, not everybody was aware of Chad Collier at different areas, or Matt Stryker and Hero. And, Hero was the one getting out probably the most out of all the guys you'd see on the, at all levels. Because you see Hero everywhere. Like, we did a regular show in New Albany, Indiana, and Hero was there all the time. And, Necro Butcher and myself and BJ Whitmer and Chad Collier, Matt Stryker, so, I mean, it's similar in that aspect, but it's different too, because everybody's aware of these guys now. And also back then it was so spread out. Like, to do those shows, you'd hit Chicago and then you'd be, we'd be in Baltimore. And so, like, I mean, there's 9 hours of traveling time between those to now, where these guys, One, flights are a lot heavier now in the indies too, because back then you were driving. There wasn't no indie shows flying you anywhere. I don't care who you were, unless you were, recently off television. And so now a lot of guys are getting flights, and the business has just picked up because obviously the internet and everybody's more, accessible to see. But just like you said, back then around this area, there was no like weekly shows. But all that really started probably in 03, as that started changing, because I think it was 03 is when I started working. Let's see. Let me think of the time frame here. 05 is when I really started working like 5 to 6 nights a week. And like it was an every week thing. Like I remember, for example, when I first met Tony at the KZO, and he came down from Ohio, he came to the Green Acres Flea Market for Danny and the what were they called? The UCW? Is that what I'm the worst with the initials.
We were just talking about that show earlier, and we couldn't come up with it either.
I think it was UCW, or something.
Is that Danny Ray?
Yeah, Danny Ray. So they ran every Thursday at the Green Acres Flea Market in Alcoa. And it's funny too, because man, like, it sounds like you're talking about some backwoods, bad stuff, but we had a college crew that came in every Thursday there. We were drawing 350 to 400 people every Thursday. Of course there was weeks that it was down, but on Thursdays we were drawing to 300, college kids, so they're all rowdy. And so you had 300 college kids. It made you feel like you had 5,000 because they're all so loud and, into everything that was going on. But we started doing that, and then just that's where I met Tony at first, and it seemed like it was just a couple months after I had Tony on the road with me. And at that time we were doing Tuesdays in Nashville, Wednesdays in Evansville, Indiana, Thursdays for Danny. One week in particular that sticks out in my mind was we did Tuesday Nashville, Wednesday Evansville, Thursday for Danny in Alcoa. Friday I flew up to meet up with Jerry Lynn in Kansas City, Kansas to do a seminar and then a show. And then I got a rental from there and drove from Kansas City, Kansas to Chicago, Illinois to do Chicago-style wrestling for Steve Boz. And then that very next day, we were in Warner Robins, Georgia, which is like, as South Georgia as you could possibly get, pretty much. And I don't think I slept that week, except for like 3 or 4 hours, So at that time, it was cool because I was working so often, and I got to meet so many guys doing that stuff, and I got to help guys too. Like, the Tate twins started probably, 2010, 2011. And my time frame is completely off. I'm the worst at that. But whenever they started, I got to get those guys on the road, and Crimson, who is now of the Workings with Jax Dane, met him when his first match ever, and got him on the road with us, and we immediately started doing AIW in Cleveland, Ohio back then, and then of course I got to go back a couple years ago, and really have a cool run there. But so it got from being, that you had to 5-6 nights a week and most of that stuff being in the Southeast to it almost completely going away a few years ago. And that's probably about the time you guys started, really, is when it started going away. Because you guys, when did NGW start altogether?
It originally started in 2011.
Okay, so
we didn't really start running hard until 2014. Okay,
yeah. So 2014 is when it died. 2011 it was still kind of, you had a lot of shows on every street corner. You still do now, but it slowed down. It slowed down so much probably about 2014 or so, or 2013.
Sorry to interrupt, but do you think around that time? I mean, to me, I feel like that's kind of the height of social media in that time. Do you think a lot of that, the downfall of some of these shows, would be social media and some of the negative aspects that people could easily get accessible to, and seeing that some of these shows are not that good? Do you think some of that kind of falls on that, or do you think it just what do you think of that?
I mean, I think that definitely had an impact, because you had a lot of guys that had never done, when you break wrestling down, it's just entertainment, and there's so many guys that haven't been in the public eye that any negative comment, it really cut them. It really, and they started dwelling on that. Like, I remember Tony and I used to joke all the time. One of the shows we did, a guy actually got out on the microphone, probably about that time, probably 2012, 2013, and cut a promo on the fans that were talking bad about him on message boards. And I remember thinking, I'm like, man, this isn't for him. Like, we were a lot more crude, and I'm a lot, older and more mature, just now, even to back then. But like, we were a lot more crude in what we said, but that was pretty much what we were saying. Like, man, this isn't a place for him. Like, and if, something like that's going to cut you so deep, this isn't the business for you. But then you saying that, what is it, the downfall? I think definitely, like, I hadn't necessarily thought about it. I think a lot of it was just people that, this is a business. People that didn't have a business mind frame, it kind of just started taking a toll on them, one, financially, and two, just, probably physically and emotionally and everything else. But also, yes, I think that cut them. And I also think it brought light to the good shows as well. So I think, the outcome of all of it was mostly positive. You got rid of the stuff that, you weren't going to be able to sustain anyways,
What do you think about, like, kind of bouncing off of that? Do you think that this era, with the internet being the way it is and everything, that it makes it easier for guys to maybe get themselves over? And then also just kind of touching on, like, I don't know, some of the more popular, like, indie gimmicks right now, like kind of like Joey Ryan and people like that. Like, do you think that maybe, 10, 15 years ago that they would have been as popular without the access to, so much social media and stuff like that? I mean, do you think maybe it's a little easier now to, like I said, get over as a wrestler?
Well, I mean, being a dad of 5, I truly believe and wholeheartedly believe hard work's eventually going to pay off for anybody. But I think it just has changed the business as such that, I mean, the amount of talk and impact that Cody and the Bucks have already had wouldn't be possible without social media. And so, like, for, guys making a living, I mean, there's so many guys right now making a living on the indie scene, that wouldn't be possible without social media. So, like, do I think they would have been as over? No, but I think it's just a different time too. I mean, they would have eventually gotten somewhere, I think, no doubt. They eventually got a job, eventually made a living in pro wrestling because of their talent and hard work, but it definitely makes it a lot more sustainable without a company's backing to do that with social media. Because, I mean, you're hiring that brand, when you book those guys, when you book Joey Ryan and when you book, guys like that, you're hiring a brand to come in and, be representative of your brand. So it's so different, because before you were just going to, I'm going to book this guy and I want you to, because I remember even like when I first started doing some of the bigger shows, I would go in and I would be a completely different person because that's what they needed that night. You know what I mean? And now, like, you can't book Joey Ryan and be like, well, tonight, man, we're gonna put you in this mask and you're gonna be Captain, Crusher or whatever. Why would you do that? You know what I mean? That you're not going to hire him to do that. So that's how it was back then. I remember lots of times I go to shows and they'd be like, "Here's this mask character. We'll pay you an extra $50 if you do it." Okay, like that's just not the case now. You know what I mean?
Is there footage out there somewhere of you wearing a gimmick like that?
I'm sure somewhere. Yes, I mean that didn't happen often, but it did happen sometimes. Sometimes it was like, "Hey, we'll get you double pay if you wrestle again under this hood." Okay, whatever. Pay me again.
So. Transitioning from that just into, like, I guess tell us a little bit about, from my earliest memories of you coming into NGW, I think the first show we had you on was, I think it was the first Cody show. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe so.
And I think just tell us about, like, how did you hear about that, and like what, had you heard anything about us before, or like what brought us to your attention, I guess?
I had heard a little bit before because, like, I always keep up with what's going on in the area. But, like, in all honesty, to be completely 100% transparent, I saw that you guys were advertising Cody and Matt Cross, and I know Matt a little bit, and I was like, man, are these guys really bringing these guys in here? Because Jesse Ellis used to run Newport. And I was the main event working with Rick Steiner or Buff Bagwell or whatever the case, and there's like 15 people in the crowd. And I'm like, man, are these guys doing well enough in Newport that they can sustain that? Is that feasible there? And I started asking people, and everybody said completely positive things. So that's when I reached out to Cody, and I was like, hey, I'd love to be there if you guys can use me. And he responded immediately and got me there. And I had a really fun match. I think I wrestled Elliott that night, and that was super fun. And the crowd was super into it. Storm was there, and so Storm and I met up beforehand and kind of rode up together. And so it was a blast, because that was the one Storm was on too, right? Wasn't he there?
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, because he called me too and asked me if I was on it. So I think that's actually when I first noticed that Cody was going to be there. Is Storm called me and was like, "Hey, Amigo, do you know these guys? Is this legit? My money going to be there?" I was like, "Who is it?" And he told me the name. I was like, "I don't know, man. Let me check." And so I started asking people to make. That's what it was. That's actually how it started. Was I started asking people to make sure that Storm's money was going to be there. And everybody was like, "Yeah, man, they're good. Yeah, it'll be good." That's always good too when nobody's like, "I don't know, man. It's gonna, I don't know if they'll draw." Nobody said that. It was no question. Everybody's like, "Oh, for sure."
Yeah. Go back for me, because I've never heard of this other guy who ran in Newport. What show was that was running there?
Jesse Ellis ran it, and maybe it was called UCW. Maybe they all were called UCW. I don't know. I think his was actually UCW, and Danny Grubbs was something else. I don't know. But I'm the worst. Tony used to get so mad at me all the time because I would never know what the name of the company was. I would never know who else wrestled there. I would never know any of that stuff. I would just know we were in, Pikeville, Minnesota or whatever, and this guy was paying us, and that's all I ever knew. And Tony would always be like, I want to see who's on this show. What's the name of the show? I'm like, I don't know, man. Like Jim Green is paying us, and we're in wherever, But Jesse ran it, and like he did TV on it there, and actually had a pretty sweet TV deal from what I remembered. Just local access kind of stuff. But I think they ran him like 4 or 5 times a week, and yeah, man, it never drew. Like we would draw decent in the other surrounding towns around it, but like never draw a Newport.
The funny thing about Newport is when myself and Cody, we used to do little spot shows with this terrible show out that way, and the only time they would ever draw is when me and Cody would put a lot of effort into promoting, because the promoter wouldn't do his job. But everyone told us when we started running back there in 2014 that Newport was dead and that there was no crowd there, and we almost took it as a challenge to get to where we are now, and it took a long time to get there. And it's cool to know that there were shows before that had such a hard time, and that we've kind of overcome that. And I really do attribute, and I'm going to always go back to this, to social media. I feel like social media gives so many people a voice, and people can see things that typically, say if I hung a flyer, maybe 10 people will see that compared to, 1,000 people seeing a post or something that we do.
Yeah, for sure. And like, that's so cool that you guys took it as a challenge and not to just run away, because that happens so often, like, especially when you're looking at different places to run things, and you're looking at the other shows that run around the area, and, you never want to, and I think I know you guys well enough to say out loud that you guys never want to step on anybody's toes either, and recently looking at towns and that kind of stuff. I just don't want to step on anybody's toes, but you also take into consideration of who's ran there before, how well did it do, who do they have on the show, kind of like what that fan base is used to. And what NGW brings is completely different than, just the straight up Southern wrestling that was there in the past, and it's so fun. And I remember telling Storm that night in Newport, I was like, man, this town used to draw nothing. And I was like, to see like, this talent coming in here and being such a different thing is so cool.
Yeah, I think everything around here too. Not trying to bury anybody, but a lot of stuff seems very repetitive, and I think that was like our idea, is that if we're wanting to bring a crowd here and pack this place out, like we're gonna have to give them something different, because like you're saying, all these other shows, you don't remember. I mean, you don't remember the names of these shows, or but they were all, because I kind of remember that era too, and they were all very similar. Like it nothing really stood out.
Yeah, I was always the champion.
Yeah.
And I was always running from some, local baby face that was the flavor of the month or whatever.
But I guess from there, just tell us like what are I don't want to get too far ahead, but like after that night, just kind of what I think we talked that night. We agreed that we wanted to use you some more and everything, and I mean, what did you think moving forward? Like you saw the potential there, but I mean, just wanted to get on the train and keep rolling, or I mean.
Yeah, for sure. But like really at that time too, I was also doing AIW in Cleveland, and I knew I had some injuries and things going on, and I didn't know how much longer I was going to get to be able to perform. But what I really dug about AIW and you guys is the potential for it to grow because, in all honestly, and this isn't going to actually be what I mean, but the youth of John Thorne at AIW and the youth of Cody and Eddy at NGW were going to allow things to progress and evolve and not be set in your ways, this is who we're using and this is how it's done. And you got to have this. It's A, B, it's A and B to get to C. And that's just period, because I already saw you guys wanting to grow. And like, I always enjoyed the weekly shows in places, and I knew it was going to be there from town to town. But when you had something going really well, I was always just curious and kind of bothered by the shows that just had they were just so stagnant. And I was like, if you got something rocking and rolling, why wouldn't you try to grow and continue to be better? Because that's just how I am as a person. I'm like, why don't you want to grow? Why don't you want to be better and bring new things in? And you guys, were that way. And I was like, and just talking to Cody, talking to you after that first initial night, I was like, let me know about all the shows in the future. I'd love to be here as much as possible. And you're like, yeah, I'd love to have you. And we really want to get as many talented guys on board. And, that wasn't you saying that to make me feel good about myself. That's just really how you felt. You're like, I want as many guys that have knowledge on this show. And it showed already by who was there and kind of the layout of the promotion of how you had some of your local guys or even guys that were driving 2 hours in that weren't, stars already working with stars. And so it was obviously a telltale sign to me of growth for the future.
Yeah, and that's something me and Cody have talked about. My father, he passed away when I was 6. So I mean, for a long time I never had a real positive male role model. But my father-in-law, he just passed away last year. But we've talked about how Cody's father and my father-in-law, they're all set in their ways, and I think it's that older generation of folks. And I think, I'd include you. I mean, you're only a few years older than me, and then Cody's only a couple of years younger than me. That we're in this generation where we live in a time where it's so progressive, and people are a lot more willing to do different things and change compared to that older style where they're, like you said, they're set in their ways and they don't want to change anything. And we felt that way about wrestling, that we would see different shows pop up, but you would see the same like 8 or 10 people on that same show, and it still happens now. And it's like, if I'm a paying customer to come to your show, what's going to motivate me to come to show A when show B and show C may have tickets $2 cheaper, but it's the same exact show, just differently, put on the card.
Right. Yeah, that's very much how it was for so long in the area. It was just, the same guys, same mix of guys, and you just, jumbled it up. It just seemed like every show just, put everybody in one of those little ball spinners and just picked out, okay, no, well, you're going to be the bad guy tonight. You're going to be the good guy tonight, and I'm the promoter. And, I don't pay nobody more than $55. I just don't do it, Yeah.
Especially if you're a real wrestler.
Yeah. Oh my God. Not getting your payoff because somebody's mom thinks you're a real wrestler and you beat her son up.
You made me pop, man. I appreciate that.
And I'm probably,
Go ahead.
I'm probably the last guy that's actually going to beat anybody up, to be honest with you. If wrestling wasn't a show, man, I would not have been in it. I completely 1,000% adopted Jerry Lynn. The first time I wrestled him, the last thing he said before we went to the ring, he was like, I think this is going to be great, but please don't hurt me. I was like, what? And he's like, don't hurt me, buddy. This is not real. Don't hurt me. And I was like, all right. And I remember like that I got, it got even more busy getting on the road with him and just more traveling. And, the matches became a little bit more demanding because he took me to places that the crowds demanded a little bit more. And I remember thinking, all right, well, I see now. Jesus Christ. We were doing, that was the first time I did a Ring of Honor and, those places because of Jerry. Jerry got me on that stuff. And, doing 2 or 3 Ring of Honor shows in a row, those, a few more bumps than I was used to taking in, East Tennessee indie shows. After that, I was like, please don't hurt me either. Jesus.
It's funny, man, because I was reading this to Eddy earlier on Twitter. Veda Scott put up a post, and she said, I think wrestling schools should take out the squats and the squats and something else. And she was like, they should replace it with you getting put in a cardboard box, tossed down like 7 flights of steps, and then forced to drive like 8 hours overnight. That should be like part of the curriculum because that's pretty much like what your body goes through. Man,
like I remember so many times that we would just do a show and we would be, on the road for 13 hours to the next town, and like we wouldn't sleep. And they would, gosh, when Travis Sawyer still wrestled. I don't know if anybody really remembers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Travis was on the road. Travis did a Ring of Honor with us a few times as well, and it was all over the place. And it was always hilarious because Tony and I would get slap happy, and we'd start laughing about, the dumbest shit you could ever imagine. Like we would laugh about Turn Right. We legitimately laughed about Turn Right for like 4 months straight. Because, in all honesty, we turned it into Shane Williams' voice. So it was Turn Right, so it became Tonight. So like, we would laugh about that, and that's not funny. We would laugh about that for hours. And then we would get past the slap happy part. Well, then we were just tired and nothing was funny. And Travis would say something actually intelligently funny, and we wouldn't laugh. And he'd be like, oh, fuck you guys. I hate you both sometimes. I've been listening to your dumb asses just giggling about dumb shit for the last 17 hours. And I say something funny, you both just sit there with thumbs up your ass. Travis beat me up driving several times because I would get him booked and he'd be booked as a babyface, but I wouldn't tell him, and he hated it. And we'd be driving, we were driving to Fort Smith, Arkansas, the first time I got him on for Matt Riviera's show there. And we were about 7.5 hours into the trip, and he's looking out the window, and he's like, I sure do wish I knew who the fuck I was wrestling tonight. And I looked in the rearview mirror because every time he would wrestle as a babyface, he would wrestle somebody from Iraq or something, and they'd be like Sheikh Abdul Jamar, whatever, and so he would be in the ring chanting USA, So like he said that at 7.5 hours in the trip to Fort Smith, Arkansas from Nashville, and he looked out the window. I wish I knew who I was wrestling tonight. And I looked in the rearview mirror at Tony, and I went, USA, real quiet. And he's like, you son of a bitch. I'm a fucking baby face. He starts punching me. I'm like, oh, Travis, I'm trying to drive. And he's like, hitting me in my face. And then we would have Jerry, when Jerry would be with us, because we knew he wouldn't hit Jerry. We'd have Jerry tell him who he was wrestling, if it was, some Sheiky gimmick or something. And Jerry would tell him, well, Travis, get your red, white, and blue bandana out. And Travis would be like, I hate all y'all. Even you, Jerry. I hate you a little bit. Those are fun times, too. It just, it goes back to the social media thing, though, where obviously now, if Travis is, relevant and wrestling on a regular basis and all that, they wouldn't book him as a babyface because that's not who he is,
Talk about too, like the camaraderie, like that you're talking about right now. Did you ever do you think that there is a visible difference between locker rooms then and locker rooms now as far as how guys treat each other? Because I know, around the time that I first got exposed to wrestling in this area, there were very obvious cliques and guys didn't always treat everybody the best. But I feel like now, especially at NGW, and I think this is the current trend, is that, it's more of like just a big family, and there's less of that like separation. Do you see that, or is that?
Oh, for sure. I think that's just pop. I think that's just pop culture in general, though. I think it's just a culture. Like at the time, even like, when I first started, it was kind of pushed as, you got to be selfish.
Yeah.
Everybody else is going to be, you have to be. And, that was when I was, I did my first stuff for WWE in 04, not that I was on the radar. And that was when I was first trying to get in. And then 05, I started doing Deep South in McDonough, Georgia for WWE. And then shortly after that's when I was in Nashville, and I was in TNA offices every week, trying to drop off stuff to Terry Taylor. And I was in 04 too, was the first few times I was at the Asylum in Nashville during TNA, and it was funny because I twice was on a TNA show, but nobody could remember, but like I was twice there, and it was one time I was in the group that was Sports Entertainment Extreme, SEX. I was in that group for, legitimately 25 seconds.
Yeah.
Like the next week I get there, the Ron and Don Harris is like, sorry, Bubba, there ain't nothing for you. And then the next time I tagged with Johnny Devine, that was in Team Canada, is when him and Andy had got stabbed out in a bar in Nashville. And when they were bringing him back, they were wanting to see if they could make Johnny a babyface. So they tagged Johnny and I up, and we wrestled Hot Chocolate, Corey Williams, and Kid Thriller. And we didn't realize it was being taped until I started getting bookings because I was on Explosion. People started calling me like, hey, I saw you on Explosion last week. Can you come in? And I was like, okay. And I didn't realize that was taped for television. I thought we were just doing dark match, but even during that time, even like, a show like Impact and stuff like that, it was still pretty clicky. And now you go to those places and everybody's kind of sitting together and everybody's kind of hanging out. But I also think it's because, once again, because of social media, you got, like I said, you go to AAW in Chicago, you go to AIW in Cleveland, you're going to NGW, you go to, PWG and see, you're going to have your Joey Ryans, your Matt Crosses, Joey Janela, Eddie Kingston, Hot Sauce Tracy Williams. They're all kind of, you're going to see all these guys about the same spot. So I think that everybody just sees each other more. So everybody's developed more relationships because, one, there is more larger shows, but, because of social media, more people getting attention. But it's also, you see these matchups. You see Eddie Kingston versus Tracy Williams. You see Matt Cross and Ray Phoenix, like we had at NGW, which was so good. And then people see it because of social media, so then they book it. So then those two guys are working together again, and it's just, I think that's a lot of it, is that it's a traveling circus, I think,
I know you've, like you kind of touched on how you were, doing stuff with WWE. What's the atmosphere like when you're doing stuff for WWE? Like how's protocol work? Because I've always wondered that, because I've never been involved in anything like that. I mean, we've seen you on TV doing security and stuff like that, but how's that all work? How do you even get contacted for that?
The first time I got contacted was Burt Prentice got me on. I was working for him on a regular basis in Nashville, and they would call Burt when they came to the area. That was how it was back in the day. They had a guy in every area that they would call and like, hey, we need some extra guys. And Burt was always the guy, because I believe he may have been the first person to send the Hardys, for extra stuff. And he may have been the first person to send, several other people. And so at that time, it was always, when they came to Nashville, Corey Williams was always one of the guys. Bully Douglas was always one of the guys. And then when I started working for Burt and became one of, the core guys, I became one of the guys. So the first time he sent me, then I've always just been a type of person, I like to get the okay myself. So I got the contacts after that myself. And when I would just reach out when I knew they were coming to the area, or they would reach out to me. And because there were some times that they would just call and be like, hey, we need an extra guy. Do you mind to drive a little further? And like when they first started doing the Rosebud thing, I was there quite a bit. And I think they called on me a lot for that kind of stuff, just because I was dependable. Because if I said I was going to be there, I'd be there. Because you'd be surprised how many guys get that and don't show. So I think that was the thing. I was just dependable. But back then, like when I first started doing it, you were just in the locker room, the extra local guy locker room, and you kind of left everybody alone. To where recently, one, I know so many guys that are there personally now, so it's a little different. But also, just even the guys that had been there the first time, it's a lot more open. It's a lot more laid back. It's more organized too. So you kind of know when you walk in. There's labels of arrows pointing you which way you're supposed to go, and you got to go check in at production, and it's just more organized too. So they let you have a little more freedom. So I was there so often that I knew several guys, and then just guys that had got, like Adam Pierce is an old friend because that's who booked me at Ring of Honor when Jerry got me on, and and then the Singh brothers are old buddies, and and Revival guys, and all those guys are guys I worked with before in the past. So it was a little different for me, but even the guys I know that had it was like their first or second time, like James Carver, who's a really good brother out of Kentucky. I don't believe he has any, aspirations to like make it big time, but he got to do an extra spot, and he was super excited, and it was super cool. It was super cool for him to be there, and he was just talking too about how open it was, and how he was kind of able to just walk around, do his own thing, and how it wasn't what it wasn't as like nerve wracking as he expected. So lately, like I said, I think that just goes back to pop culture. It's a lot more chill than it used to be, because when it used to be like, man, you did feel like you're walking on eggshells. The first, probably the first 7-8 years I did it, with stuff doing stuff with WWE. But like the last few years I got to do stuff. It was just, man, it was a good time. Like it was a blast to run around and do whatever they asked you to do, and it's fun for me to do that stuff. Because I've always been able to keep a pretty good perspective on everything, and like I grew up wanting to do stuff for WWE, and I got to. So I was very cool to say yes to about anything they asked me to do. And that was another reason I think they used me so often, because I was just like, okay, yeah, for sure.
Do you think, like, because you're talking about how it's changed from when you first started doing those to now, and we were talking about how, like, earlier, how the indie locker rooms have changed and stuff. Do you think that it's just one of those things where, as a whole, everyone sees that it's more productive if everyone just kind of works together, and it seems like that's the best route for business, and that could be partially like why everything's kind of evolving into what it is now and how different it is. Because I mean, there almost seems like there's like a line where everything is just starting to like change so drastically, and it's not been like that long of a period of time if you really look at it. It's so different now.
Yeah, I think that could definitely be part of it. I also think a lot of it, as I said, is just kind of where we are as a culture. Everybody is more sensitive, but that also breeds everybody taking everybody else's feelings into consideration a lot more. So I think that's just kind of where we are as a culture in general. But I also think that it's the power structure, like, because you have Adam Pierce, who is a producer. And like he never was, he wrestled for WWE sometimes, but he was never a WWE talent. And, you have so many of those guys that are in those roles right now, and you got Carino and the PC and guys like that. So you have a lot more of the boys. And also, it goes back to, well, one big thing with WWE, it's a publicly traded company. So they have so many different sponsors and, city officials and, government officials coming in and out of those arenas constantly. Like, you can't have a bunch of guys walk around acting like assholes. You can't have, these egotistical pricks walking around, like their shit don't stink. When you have all these people donating all this money to the company, you can't have that. And that's one of those things that they make clear, like smile when somebody speaks to you. But also, I think a lot of it is that the boys kind of have a little more leverage now than they have since WCW went out of business because of social media. So I think everybody's trying to make everybody's seat a little more cushioned. You know what I mean? Because now you got guys willingly wanting to leave because of the Bucks and Cody. So I think the boys have a little bit more leverage now, so everybody's treated a little better.
And I feel like, too, especially with that leverage, the accessibility of booking somebody is a lot easier now than I would say, even 10 years ago. People putting their emails on Twitter and, Facebook and, Instagram. We talked about how that's how we actually got information for Shane Strickland is through Instagram. Like I said, 10 years ago, it might have been a whole different story when social media was still kind of on the uprise.
Well, for sure, because like everybody's always like, how did you get bookings at these places? I mean, it's so different. Like when I did it, I had to have Tracy Smothers tape me and introduce me to these people, because how else would they know? And how else would I contact them? There was no Twitter or Facebook to get on and, message an NGW homepage and go, hey, who do I need to talk to about bookings? You didn't have that. You know what I mean? Like you just had to hopefully know somebody that knew somebody that could get you in contact with someone, or you're mailing them your 8x10 with your stats on the back and a videotape. You ask guys to do that now, like, it's like you're trying to insult them. Like where you could look on YouTube. Well, it was copy and paste the link. Like that's just how it was. I mean, so yeah, it's definitely more accessible for sure. And like, and that's why people all the time too, they're like, do you think it's bad that, these veterans aren't there to, because I mean, I think really I'm not saying I'm the last whatsoever, but I think I'm definitely one of the last guys that got to get on the road and have that veteran influence, and be kind of just trained on the road more than trained in a training center or anything like that. I don't think it was either better or worse. I think it's just different because now, you have the accessibility of YouTube and watching things and learning things by watching and asking other people and reaching out, because all the time, I know Matt Cross and those guys all the time get emails. Hey, I'm getting into the business. Do you have any advice? And lots of those guys will answer that, and back when I first started, there was nowhere to, I couldn't hit up Jeff Hardy and be like, hey man, I'm thinking about getting into business. Got any advice for me? Like how am I supposed to do that? So now that happens, and guys actually take time out to do that all the time. So I think it's just different. Like I learned in a different way, and I think I learned a little faster for me because I was in the car with Smothers 4 or 5 days a week, every single week for about a year and a half straight. So like I learned so much picking his brain. I got, to be around Ricky Morton and Bobby Eaton and Jamie Dundee and, Wolfie D and all these guys that just, the Naturals and all these different guys I got to be around on a regular basis, and Terry Taylor, Harley Race, these guys that I saw on a semi-regular basis that I learned from, and then like, so back then you would do those, shows and travel with Smothers and learn so much, but now, you couldn't get on these shows without somebody like Smothers putting a word in, but now you can, put a video package together and hit one of the guys up. Hey, I'm trying to get in. Can I come help set the chairs up? And, and it's just it's just different. I don't think it's better or worse. It's just different.
After Crossroads, I don't remember. Was the next show?
Next show would have been Don't Call to Come Back one, where he worked Joey Ron.
So yeah, you and Joey would have been the next show. Does that sound right to you?
No, I thought it was cool, man, because like I got to meet Joey a few times, and at that time, once again, I knew I had some injuries and I didn't know how much time I had left, but at the same time, I was rocking and rolling in AIW in Cleveland, Ohio. So it was kind of one of those things like, okay, cool. Here's some cool things for me, because at that time up there, I know we were leading into me going into the gauntlet for the gold at AIW, which I knew I was going to come down to the end, and it was going to become one of those things where I was getting pushed right to their tournament after that. So I was like, well, cool. I can then have Joey's match. So for me, I knew it was going to be good for my social media presence of kind of the things that were happening at the time. So
kind of rub almost.
Right, for sure. Yeah, because I knew that was going to go well for me. I knew I was getting ready to be, in some matches with Cole Cabana and Joey Janela and those guys. And then here I was doing Joey too. And it was always a little more special to me because it was in East Tennessee. So to me, it was always like, cool, I get to do that here at home,
Yeah, and I think about that too, and almost sometimes that almost gives me some motivation in some of the things that we do, because I think about guys like Menace and you and just guys that are here locally, and I feel like, you deserve to have some of that here at home, and same thing with Menace and some of the local guys. It's like, these are like killer, somewhat dream matches for the area, and I just feel like, I'm glad that we could at least put some of those together, regardless of how long we run or whatever, just for the individual guys like you, to be able to have that here, and then to be able to have the local crowd see that too. It's special for everybody involved, really.
Yeah, for sure. And like I believe that was the first night there too. I really realized that what a different crowd the NGW had, because they cheered when I came out because they knew I was wrestling Joey. And it's just one of those things too that, like, we can all sit around here and I could tell you all the things I'm proud of what I've done. You guys could talk about all the things you're proud that you brought to NGW, but that crowd is why we're able to do it. Is that particular crowd? Because when I came out, they were like, "Cool, man, he gets the rest." I knew that's what they were thinking. I felt it. I felt that they were thinking, "Hey, our guy is getting to wrestle Joey Ryan." And it was one of those things that, like, a lot of people came over like, "Oh, I'm so glad I got to see you wrestle him here," because they had watched me, Jesus, for already 15 plus years.
Yeah, and it's kind of a funny story. I mean, we talk about you, working Joey Ryan, and then all these injuries kind of started to pile up on you. But we were talking just recently, like before we started recording, about the pop you got the first time that you refed. What'd that feel like, man?
That was cool, man, because very, very, the majority of the time I wrestled, I was a heel, and I took a lot of pride into being a heel because I felt like that was giving the crowd something more when I did get my comeuppance. And that's how Smothers really taught me. Smothers was always like, if you're a heel, you don't do things for a pop. You don't do things to get a good reaction. He's always real down on that. He goes, because your satisfaction, your glory is when you get defeated. Because listen, how happy, if you're a good heel, you can really make those people happy. And you're the one that are really making them forget about their shitty day at work. And Smothers said that to me like one of the first times we were ever in the car together. And that just really clicked. I was like, man, he's right. Because as a kid, I was, kind of chubby and not popular. And so I lived vicariously through, I didn't have a bad childhood whatsoever, but like I lived vicariously through Shawn Michaels and those guys because I thought they were cool and I wasn't cool. And getting into wrestling, that was kind of one of my things. I want to be able to make people live vicariously through me. And then once Smothers really broke down that psychology of wrestling, of being a heel, you're the guy that actually allows them to forget about their day if you can get them to dislike you so much that the only thing they're worried about is your comeuppance. So I really took a lot of pride in being a real jerk for a long time, and I kind of, the majority of my 20s, I think I lived it a little bit too much. But like, especially in the area, I felt like I always had some legit heat and all that, and it was nice to just the people were like, "You're a jerk, but we appreciate what you did." So that was so cool for me. That was such a cool moment for me. It really was. And I'm not a big sentimental sit down and get emotional talking about stuff, but that was such a cool moment for me because it was really like, hey, thanks.
Yeah, I felt that too. I was watching from the curtain, and it was just one of those moments where, like, I got goosebumps from it. Honestly, like, just because it's very rare that people get to break down the walls and actually, that, I guess what I'm trying to say is that moment was actually real. Like, that was real appreciation that they were showing to you, and it just, I think that was like one of the most special moments that we've had, in my opinion.
Yeah, I remember I was at the door, which, if you ever see me, I'm at the door getting money and stuff, and I pulled out my phone and started recording it because I was like, this is a moment.
I appreciate that too. I'm so glad. I told my wife that because bless her heart, now that I'm not bumping all the time, she has to hear all my stupid wrestling stories all the time. But I told her that I was so appreciative that Eddy, that you caught that on film, that I could watch it again later. I was so appreciative that you got that on there.
And I think you also got it with High Spots as well. Did you?
I think High Spots.
Yeah, they got it too. Yeah,
they got it as well. And just like it was, like I said, man, like there's certain times when we've done the shows where you feel like you said, it's like a moment. It's a moment that people won't forget. It's like when we had Saber there, and everyone was saying, "Please come back," and that was one of the first times we ever had someone say, "Please come back," and that was like a moment. It made me feel good because it made me feel like our crowd respected you enough, knowing how much you kind of put into this area and helped it grow. They could see the growth right then, and they know that you're not performed anymore, but you're still a part of it in some aspect, and that's what they really love the most.
Yeah, and so many people that night came out. They're like, "Oh, so glad to see you here," and that was just so nice. That it wasn't like, I never, I had that fear. I didn't want to be viewed as being that old guy that stuck around. I don't feel old by any means, but like, I didn't want to be like, "Oh, he's just still trying," because that's not the case. That's not it. I just love it, and I miss the boys, and I don't want to be away from it. So it was so cool that night they came out. They're like, "Oh, we're so glad you're here." Are you going to referee regularly and that kind of stuff? So it was really cool. That night was great. Plus, man, some of the great matches that like I get to actually take in now. I'm not worried about what I'm doing necessarily as much. So it's so fun to be able to take in some of those matches.
Let's see. What else do we got? So, do we want to go back and talk about like while he was still? Because there's a few more matches I'm trying to think of. Like what were some of the other matches that you had at NGW? I'm trying to think. You had the tag deal
With Driscoll,
with Driscoll and Abyss and Crazy Steve. The Steve surprise was pretty big too.
Yeah, that was cool, man. The best part is Abby being on his knees while Driscoll was holding him and looking at me and going, "I got goosebumps, brother."
Yeah.
Yeah, like when Steve was coming out. And the best part is that we kept it secret, but like as soon as we started beating on Abyss, they started chanting Steve.
The crazy thing about that is that all that credit goes to Crazy Steve, because we were going to announce it, and Steve's like, "There's no reason for you guys to announce it because you're already going to have a draw anyway. That I'm not really going to help your draw out any more than what you already have." He's like, "Just keep it a secret," and then we talked about it too. If you watch back, on our pivot share or on high spots, if you watch back, the volume of the crowd doesn't do it justice of what it was like being there live, because that pop was so loud, and you could just like the genuine reaction to people, like they didn't know it was coming. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, and the best part is that the people that were chanting it before he came out, it was like they didn't think he was going to be there though. Because that don't happen on indie shows. A name like that he doesn't just pop out on indie shows. Because they had just because it had just got released that he was gone from Impact.
Yeah.
And then all the rumors that he was immediately going to WWE and and this and that. So like it was the people that were chanting it, they didn't believe it. And then like when he did come out, they were like, "Well, we're in on something." So it was such a cool reaction. Like Abyss was being for real. He was like, "I got goosebumps, brother." Like he did. He got in the back. He's like, "You feel that, man? That was awesome."
So from that, like, are there any other moments that you could think of that really just pop out in your head that just being a part of it so far that's just like one of the kind of some of the top things that you can remember or think of?
I mean, let's just throw it out there. I don't like to start anything, but there was never a 3 count on me during that tag match against Crimson and Jack Stain. So let's just throw that out there. They never actually defeated me.
That's so true.
That's one of the only things, because that was at Nightmare on Army Road, and we talked about that on our episode with John from Sick on Cinema, and we talked about it how that show is flawless, except for that ending of your match, and it's nothing to do with the competitors in the match. It's just
I think that was like the best match that Crimson and Jackson had there, honestly, with pacing and all that. Because it's not a secret. Crimson and I are buddies. We talked about that for the pacing and everything else. That was one of the better matches they had there, and they really felt like they were, got to be kind of representative of what their characters actually are that night, more than they ever have before there. And then that.
And the thing is like with Crimson too, it was like a running thing where like every show something would pop up and it would always involve Crimson, and it was no fault of his own. It just like with the Hoodrich thing, like that happened, and like he was hot over that. And then the next time we're like, okay, we're gonna do the tag deal, and at least he'll be able to get over in a different fashion and all that. And then the referee botch. It just seems like there was always something that just kept like screwing the pooch.
Cody, it was you.
Yeah, I mean that's probably it, honestly.
Cody walks up to me. He's like, "Dude, Crimson's pissed," and I was like, "Well, why?" And he's like, "Well, Hoodrich is getting, they're cheering him and they're booing Crimson." I'm like, "Well, look at Crimson, man. Like he's a huge, good-looking dude. If I was a guy in the crowd, I'd fucking boo him too."
What Cody really said was, "Crimson's pissed, but I can't wait till he sees what I have in store next."
Yeah,
He's gonna beat your ass. Good luck going tried and true again.
That's what it was. They're like, we're going to be the tops of Tennessee. Let's go ahead and get rid of tried and true.
It was a plan all along.
Little did he know.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I mean, kind of moving forward though. I mean, we talked about you working, with Crimson and stuff. You started working as a rep. What did you think about the whole Impact deal that we kind of got to work out with them last summer?
I think it ended up being a lot of fun, and I think it ended up running a lot smoother than even Impact probably figured. You guys allowed me to kind of be in on looking at the buildings, and Cody and I went, several different places in Knoxville there and looked around. And as Cody said I listened to the podcast, of course, as he said, we kind of just felt like the convention center wanted us there. Like it really felt like the lady that we spoke to initially, she worked really hard, I think, to make it financially feasible for us, and also to be something that's going to look aesthetically nice and pleasing on camera. And it would just end up being the best case scenario. And I really appreciated being in on that. And it had a bigger feel because of the marquee outside and the size of the building and how the building is kind of laid out. And when Impact got there, one, the talent that we use at NGW, all the Impact guys knew already. So that's one big thing, and then all the talent worked really well together. And, everything just came off great. And I think we all agree that Sue Young and Nicole Payne tore it up. And as with me having the opportunities to do so much stuff on television and all that, I really appreciated how well they worked that as a TV style match, even though they went out of the ring a few times. So they did really well of working to one side of the ring without making it look like they were working to just one side of the ring. And they just did a really great job of just telling a good story of Nicole being this, the way I look at her, especially the way she got presented in that match, because that was, if you're doing an audition tape, that was her audition. And like the way her character came out there, she was just a little Southern Spitfire that won't quit for nothing. And if you want to get dirty, I'll get as dirty as you want to get. Wrestling this character that's already been established on TV as, like a zombie kind of, bride kind of deal, that she does, and that we already know that she's going to take it to that next step. We already know that she's going to get extreme and hardcore. And I'm talking about this as if I'm somebody that watches Impact and has no idea who Nicole Payne is. She killed it. She absolutely rocked it. And it came across as something that they would have already put on a national television product, and everybody did a great job. But I just remember that sticking out because I looked at that, with Lenny and her and any of the regular local, quote unquote, NGW guys, that's your audition tape. And I think she really, knocked it out of the park on that. And I think the fans had a great time, and the meet and greet thing was a lot of fun, and just everything ended up working out really good.
I mean, going forward, you've done so much. I mean, even since you've been involved with this, I mean, you've kind of been along for the ride with, from Crossroads to now. Where do you see NGW going?
I don't think it's a big secret that, expansion's coming, and we're kind of looking into different avenues and options. And I just think that, our fans aren't just fans in Newport, which is good with our social media, presence and all that. And I really think the sky's the limit. Like there's so much social media, stuff we could get out there, and there's so much content that we have the opportunity to produce that, And one main thing is I don't want to let a lot of cats out in the bags, but we're going to start, developing more characters that are, you know, kind of NGW homegrown. And I think that's super exciting. That's something Cody and I have talked about a lot. And I think that's really exciting to kind of, you guys talking about you took Newport as a challenge. I feel like Cody's 100% on board with me when I say this. It's kind of a challenge to say, well, look at what we can do ourselves. And I think that's so exciting. Yes, for sure. And I just think I do think though, and Cody and I have kind of touched on this in conversations. I think that kind of all just happened organically and kind of just happened. What if we mean to do something? You know what I mean? Like the things that have happened, just the hard work of the talent and, and the promotion, giving it the stage to do it. What if we purposely go, this is what we're doing now? How big it can actually get,
The funny thing is, we all work our shoot jobs, and I constantly think about, NGW, daily, and in my head, I'm thinking like, we kind of teasing around, this expansion of going from, NextGenTN that we're going to have to be, Next Generation Wrestling South, Southeast, the way that things are kind of starting to shape up.
Yeah, that's just, I think people are going to be really, some things end up working out, as planned at just how big and how fast it can get big. And just then it's going to come to us keeping track of that, and keeping on board and making it sustainable for a long period of time.
And the thing too, like we touched on it a little bit, but up until just recently, it's mostly, a lot of the behind the scenes stuff has been me and Eddy. But now with you kind of stepping back from, not doing the wrestling part of things, you've, like you said, with the Impact show and just moving forward, you've really stepped in and gave us another hand and another person to bounce off of. And I think like that, it kind of makes us a three-headed monster in a way where, we can all put our heads together and really turn this into something even more.
Yeah, and I think, and I was talking to the wife about this, I think it's so cool that we all have kind of different specialties, what we're pretty good at. But like, no matter who somebody talks to, of the three of us, it's a pretty positive. Those guys are pretty cool, and I think that's super cool. That okay, I'll work with those guys. They're cool. And I think that's such a good reputation to have.
It's hard to describe how our fans have evolved so much, and it's like John. I'll keep going back to John that we had on our show. He talks about it's like a party atmosphere where like people just want to have a good time, and like that's like the epitome of what we wanted as a show is people to come have a good time.
Yeah, and I think like John Thorne of AIW, he says this when he books people. He literally says, if you can't come in and have a drink and party with us, we don't want you on the show. And I think without saying that out loud, that's how NGW is. If you can't come in and hang out and party with us, then you don't need to be here. So everybody's so cool to each other.
Yeah, and we always talk about too how we don't have a whole lot of people locker room wise that have a bad attitude. Everyone is always super positive and happy to be there, and they know what they're there for, and it's never any confusion with stuff like that.
Yeah, no, everybody's so cool.
We actually asked a couple of fans. They're like they had anything they want to talk about or fan questions. We did get a message from one of our fans, Micah, who wanted to hear some Tracy Smothers stories, which you talked about Tracy earlier. Do you have any really good Tracy Smothers stories?
With Tracy, like when I first got on the road with him, like he completely took care of me. Like he legitimately, like he got me pictures printed off. He got me bookings. If I didn't get paid, he paid me. If I didn't make any gimmick money, he gave me part of his gimmick money. He fed me. Like, and that's just, man, like that guy taught me so much. And it was times, that like it was physical teachings too. Like I remember one time in particular, I kind of just throw this out there. Then I've talked about my wife several times. She's waiting on me. So, but like this story, we were in Indiana, I believe, and we were wrestling each other. and I was the heel, and I got a lot of good steam on him. We were rocking and rolling, and we started the match with me getting steam on him. So I was on him. I was getting a lot of offense on him, talking junk to the people, and then it came time to him to kind of get a shine in. So he started making a little comeback on me, bumped me around a little bit. And he grabbed me by the back of my hair, and he went to throw me out of the ring. And I still had long hair at the time, and he threw me, but he went to throw me out of the ring, but I went between the ropes. But for the time of the match, it would have been more impactful for him to bump me around a few times, grab me, and then throw me over the top. So when I go through the ropes, he doesn't let go of my hair. So I land on all fours, but he's still got a hold of my hair. So he's like at the end of my hair, and he's yanking it, and he's going, "Come back in the ring, stupid." And I'm like coming back through the ring, like not intentionally, because he's yanking me so hard, and he's like over the top. And he throws me over the top and lets me go. And I remember looking in the ring, and he had a huge clump of my hair in his hand. And I was like, ow. And he got in the back, and he explained, well, right there, you started with a low blow before the match started, and you got on me for so long. You had heat on me for 4 minutes, and then I finally get offense, and I'm bumping you around, and I go to throw you, and he's like, how lackluster of a climax that is for me to throw you between the ropes. I should Shawn, go over the top, get a big reaction. Then we slow it back down for a little more heat. Shawn, come on, work with me. Come on, Shawn, work with me. Come on, Shawn. And it totally made sense, but ow. Like he yanked so much of my hair out, but those things, it clicked. Like I totally got it. Like, yeah, I had like 3.5, 4 minutes of heat on him before he got any offense whatsoever. And then he gets up, he bumps me around 3 times on my feet up, and he grabs back at my hair, and then he throws me through the ropes. I'm like, who cares? But yeah, if he throws me over the top rope and I take this big bump on the floor, and then he's come on, then it's so much bigger. So little nuances like that, that was the things that Smothers, I don't think, gets enough credit for. He not only helped me, but Chris Michaels, Chase Stevens, Brian Kendrick, Matt Bentley, just the Brian Danielson, a laundry list of guys that Smothers grabbed up and took on the road with him and learned, and they taught. Guy after God, like getting in the car with him. Sometimes the amount of people that were getting in the car with us, I felt like, man, I'm the one that doesn't fit in here. Like, look at all these guys. I remember one of the first times ever, it was like me, Chase Stevens, Chris Michaels, Brian Kendrick, and Matt Bentley. And I'm like, I don't belong. Like I was, very much low guy on the totem pole. So just the guy, people say different things about Smothers all the time, but what he taught me and the way he treated me was invaluable. I could have never paid it. I didn't, he didn't ever ask for a dime, and I could have never paid him enough to justify what he did.
And I always hear really good stories about Tracy. First time I ever saw Tracy Smothers was at KFW, and it blew my mind how much he would get.
Yeah, still, man, still. Like, he gives so much and works so hard, and he tries to teach, and now he's always like, Shawn, I'm just on the seniors tour. I'm just on the seniors tour, Shawn. I'm on the way out. I'm just trying to relax. Why today? It ain't got to be today. At least I ain't doing that. He had all those little sayings on the road, like, if you're on the road and like you pass a field full of cattle, you'd be like, Shawn, there's your family. Then you pass some guy and doing working on a light pole. Like, Shawn, at least we ain't doing that. Then like you'd have a car, a van pass you, has like 6 kids in the back. And it's like, Shawn, they don't care. That little baby in that car seat don't care, Shawn. They don't care we're trying to make this town in front of 20 people. They don't care. And then it's funny because you speaking of shoot jobs, I work in a town called Murphy, North Carolina, now at Murphy Health and Fitness, which is a fitness facility, and I kind of help run that place. And we used to do a show in Murphy, Carolina, me and Smothers and Lone Star and Chris Michaels and Buff Bagwell and several of us. And we would all be coming through Nashville. And so going to Murphy, North Carolina, you go through Chattanooga and you see all those fireworks stands. There's on the Alabama, North Carolina, Tennessee line, you see all those big fireworks stands. And Smothers used to call all of us. And it would be it almost, you could set your clock by it. He'd call us and be like, man, sometimes I just want to buy fireworks, and I wish some of these places would actually advertise. you know, because they all had those big neon lights, you know, these big crazy colors and, you know, these huge billboards. And he's like, you know, sometimes I just want to buy some fireworks. You never know where to find it. You know, he'd call all of us. We'd set our clock by it. You know, like the Lone Star would call us to be like, Smothers is getting ready to call us. You know, he would call us because we wait on it. We'd all wait on just Smothers to talk stupid about the fireworks stands.
Yeah, guys, and that's all we pretty much got today. Like, we were really excited. We finally got Shawn Shultz, a.k.a. Tommy Phillips, on the show. This was like pulling teeth trying to get this to finally happen, and it finally worked out. I was lucky enough to get a Sunday off. Anything you want to say, man, to kind of finish it up?
Just keep your eyes and ears on NGW social media. Hopefully have some big things coming up soon. And then March 10th, I can't wait. I think everybody's going to be super excited and super pleased with what they see March 10th.
Got anything else, Cody?
Yeah, man. I'm glad that we got Shawn on here. Shawn, I think you'd probably agree with this. We probably do about a dozen more of these, and you'd probably have a dozen more stories to tell. So I'm sure we'll have you back on here soon.
We need to do a comedy hour, not just tell stories about Tommy Rich and other guys.
I would love that, dude. Well, anyways, man, enjoy the rest of your Sunday with your family. I appreciate you hopping on here, and tell them I'm sorry we held you up so long.
Appreciate you guys. See you guys soon.
Thanks, man.
All
See
right,
you.
brother.